Before starting, just in case, forgive me, because this is the first speaking of my life, okay? I'm 23 years old, and forgive my English, I'm not very good at it, but well, I hope you can understand everything. If not, please stop me, raise your hand, no problem. So, well, my name is Genis. I'm studying psychology in Tarragona, Spain, and I am in the coordinator team of the IADMP, a very young scientific association about psychedelic medicine. If you want to take a look at the website, it will be great. We are doing research in this field, and we also offer services and other activities. Okay. So, well, let's start. This is an observational study about people who take psychedelics for the first time, okay? In this case, LSD. As you know, psychedelics can induce deeply experiences, mystical experiences. It's an interesting and thrilling field, but there's not enough research about novel consumers, in my opinion. And this is very important because if you study only people with experience with psychedelics, you will have a self-selected sample, and maybe those people are resistant to some adverse effects of psychedelics, of these drugs. And for that, they can take it without problems. But if we study novel consumers, we won't have this problem, okay? We know that the findings or the experiences when you are working in a big university or in a hospital are different. This is not our case, so maybe we can find other things in this study. But this can be useful too, I think, because we are approaching to a normal consumption, to a street consumption, okay? And well, just for information, the study started when 5 of our friends wanted to take LSD for first time. We saw an incredible opportunity to do this study because we had this very uncommon sample, people who take LSD for first time or any other psychedelic, okay? And we wanted to see if there's some change in some variable after this first psychedelic experience. Well, the objective, as I said, is very clear. Is want to see the benefits or the detriments of the drug. Here we can compare two groups of our sample. During 6 months, we looked for more first consumers of LSD among university students. And finally, we collected 9 novel consumers and 8 control subjects. Okay? The two groups were equal except by sex, as you can see. We tried to control that, but there's a majority of women in Faculty of Psychology, and they wanted to collaborate more than men. So finally, we have more women in control group, and this is a limitation. But well, for any other futures, the sample was right. Here you have the design. The original design was a longitudinal study with 3 waves. As you can see, one assessment after before the consumption, a 45 days retest after the consumption, and a 3 months follow-up in order to see the stability of some potential changes. But finally, we lost a lot of sample in the control group, and we decided to eliminate this 3rd wave in this group. So what we have is an inter-intra-group repeated measures design with 3 waves in the LSD group and 2 waves in the non-LSD group. Okay? About the follow-up in the LSD group was made only with 6 subjects, okay? Because we also lost sample here, the follow-up. Here you have the measures that we used. We made a short interview with each subject just to control possible extraneous variables, and all was fine. No one was under medication or with health problems and these things. We took EPI for personality with his 2 parallel forms, STI for anxiety, Beck for depression, SCL9GR for psychopathology, and Diener for satisfaction with life. This is an observational study, but we try to control different extraneous variables, for example, the context. We knew that the context is very important with psychedelics, so we offered them a place to take the drug. Okay? As novel consumers, they were open to any guide or recommendation, so we prepared a special room in the house of one of the authors, where all the participants took the dose. It's always the same. There were always 2 experienced caregivers, just in case, but we didn't have any bad trip or anything like that. And well, the procedure was, we recommended participants to abstain from alcohol and cannabis the day before each session, and not to drink coffee, tea, or smoke tobacco the same day. Okay? We met the subjects of the LSD group at 12, 11 in the morning for each session, taking the dose at 12, more or less. And well, after the sessions, subjects of the LSD group went to this beach. The house was near the beach. With this wonderful view, I think it's important to say because in general it was a very mystical, very special experience. So in order to interpret our findings, this information is necessary, I think. About the drug, it was another problem to solve, because we can't do the study if we don't know people are taking LSD or another thing, salt like LSD. So we advised the LSD group that before consumption, they should send a sample of LSD to Energy Control, an organization that offers free drug testing in Spain. They accepted, and they could confirm that all the samples were LSD. In that case, we're lucky. As you can see, we found 3 different types of blotters. The beer one with more than 100 micrograms of LSD in one blotter and without any taste. The Shiva with 72 micrograms of LSD and 38 micrograms of iso-LSD, this one with a bitter taste. And the classical ones, the famous Hoffman blotters with 96 micrograms of LSD and 59 micrograms of iso-LSD. This one also with a bitter taste. So 2 subjects took the beer, 2 Shivas, and 2 Hoffman. I am 5 Hoffman, sorry. And well, about the statistics, we used a non-parametric test to analyze the data. We didn't have any outliers, so maybe we could have used parametric test. With non-parametric, it's more difficult to find any significant effect. But due to our small sample, we wanted to be very rigorous and do things right. So we decided to use this non-parametric test. Okay? So let's see the results. First, we did a Mann-Whitney test in order to see the differences between groups. We did this analysis at 2 levels. First, differences between groups at the first assessment before consumption, and then differences between groups after the consumption, okay, at the retest. So let's see what happens at the first assessment. Okay. We found that LSD group were more depressed, with less satisfaction with their lives, and with more psychopathology. Okay. Concretely, in the scales of obsessions and compulsions, depression with a very high significance, psychoticism, and global severity index, which are informing about general state of psychopathology. Okay. Well, here you have the tables of the final report if you want to take a look. As you can see, there's a big difference between 2 groups. Well, the LSD group is this one with 9 subjects, and this is the non-LSD group. There's a big differences between all the scales, okay, between groups in all the scales, but Mann-Whitney found only significant differences in these 4 scales, okay? Here you have the depression and satisfaction with life, also with a big difference between groups. But now, let's see what happened after the LSD group took the LSD. Here we can start with interesting analysis, because we wanted to see if 2 groups were still different, and we found that not. Surprisingly, all the initial differences that we found disappeared, and now 2 groups are equal. Okay? We can't say that yet, but apparently we have less depression and general psychopathology and more satisfaction with life in the LSD group. This is the hypothesis. With next analysis, we will check that better. But now, for the moment, it's an interesting result. We found only one difference between our groups. Now it seems that LSD group had more paranoia than the control group. We will speak later about that in detail, but well, it's interesting to remember. The second analysis that we made is Friedman. With Mann-Whitney, we can say that there's a differences between groups at the beginning, okay, but then not. But we don't know if these differences are saying that there's a significant change of the LSD group, because we are comparing two groups. So we want to know that. We want to know if LSD group changed significantly through the time, okay? For that, we did a Friedman test, the non-parametric alternative to ANOVA. But well, before, we have to remember that now we're working only with 6 subjects. Because if you remember, at the follow-up, we had only 6, and we used this sample to compare these 3 waves. So this is a small sample. And another problem is that with Friedman, we can see specific changes. For example, differences between first assessment and retest. No, just can see global changes. So in order to interpret the results, this is also a limitation. Okay, this is what we found. Friedman says that the experimental group has changed in the variables of extraversion and lie in personality and in depression. Okay. By a glance, you can see an interesting pattern because all the scores are decreased in the retest, but at the follow-up it starts to increase again. Okay. Friedman also detected changes in psychopathology in these scales with the same pattern. First a heavy decrease at the retest and then a little increase at the follow-up. Okay. And well, here you have all these scales of psychopathology. Well, the pattern is the same, first decrease and then increase. But I want you to focus on the paranoia scale. With Mann-Whitney, we saw that LSD group had more paranoia than control group after the LSD experience. But here we can see the score decrease. So actually we can take seriously the difference observed, because here actually is decreasing, not only in the retest, continuous decreasing at the follow-up. So well. Okay, and now let's see better these changes. For that we used a Wilcoxon test. With Wilcoxon, as you know, we can analyze pairs of assessments, okay? For the moment, we saw differences between groups. We saw that LSD group changed significantly through the time, but only global changes. But now, with Wilcoxon, we can analyze specific changes, okay? Like t-test, but in non-parametric. So let's see what happened between the first assessment and the 45 days retest. We have decreases in extraversion, anxiety trait, and in depression. Okay? About the change in anxiety trait, this is very uncommon because trait of anxiety is stable, is a stable variable linked with other stable variables of personality. And actually, we hypothesized that state of anxiety is gonna change, but not trait. And we found the contrary. State of anxiety was the same, and trait changed, okay? But we ignored this information because, and we didn't expect at all, we found decrease in anxiety trait also in control group, okay? So maybe something happened in Tarragona that affected our sample, hold the sample, and we can't know if this difference comes from LSD experience or another thing. So, well. About psychopathology, this is the most relevant result because we have heavy decreases in 7 out of 9 scales of psychopathology, okay? Concrete in these scales. Wilcoxon found decrease in anxiety in this test So we have more information supporting the hypothesis that it was the LSD experience which decreased anxiety. But we can't assume it, in my opinion, okay? But well, this is very interesting. And well, I think it's important to speak about the variables in which no significant differences were obtained. Satisfaction with life, if you remember, subjects of the LSD group were more satisfied with their lives after the LSD experience. But here we don't have enough effect, it's a pity. I think with higher doses, for example, 200 micrograms, or with more sample, variables like this would have been more significant. But well, it's just an hypothesis. And the other two variables, both are clearly very far to obtain and some significance in that case. Okay. Let's see now what happens between the retest and the 3 months follow-up. I think this is an interesting result because we didn't find any change in any variable, okay? So we have preliminary information in the moment that is saying that the changes observed at the retest have stability for 3 months, okay? And this is very important. But for that, to confirm that, it's better to compare the first assessment with the 3 months follow-up. And this is what we found. Decreases in depression, in anxiety trait, but we can trust the anxiety trait, and in these 4 scales of psychopathology, okay? About the third scale of psychopathology, phobic anxiety, which isn't significance before, but now appears as significance now. Maybe I can know if comes from LSD experience too or another thing. So well, these 3 scales of psychopathology, it seems that have stability for 3 months, okay? Here you have the graphic of the evolution of the final 6 subjects of depression. As you can see, it's very visual. There's a heavy decrease in the score of depression at the retest, number 2. And how at the follow-up, the score starts to increase again a little, okay? Have a look at the first assessment. We had these 2 subjects with following the interpretation of questionnaire with mild depression, okay? But after moved to a clearly non-depressed state, and this is very great. About psychopathology, the tendency is the same. First a general decrease and then a little increase in some punctuations. Well, this one, no, this one continues decreasing. But well, here we had also 2 subjects near 70 score, that is to say clinical scores, but then moved to a non-clinical scores, okay? This is great too. This information was collected through the interviews. As you can see, 45% of the sample classified the experience as a good experience, 44% as one of the best experiences of my life, and 11%, one subject, as the best experience of my life, okay? So logically, 8 out of 9 subjects took LSD again, okay? After the retest, of course. So well, we have different conclusions with the information that I exposed. First, we saw that the LSD group scored highly in depression, in some scales of psychopathology, and they were less satisfied with their lives. But then, after the psychedelic experience, these scores decreased and were equal between our groups. We saw also with Friedman test how the LSD group changed in time in several variables. We saw clearly a tendency between the 3 assessments, general decrease at the follow-up and then a little increase. With Wilcoxon, we saw very heavy decreases in several variables, especially in psychopathology and in depression. And finally, we observed the stability in the scores of depression and the 3 scales of psychopathology, that we suppose that it's more susceptible to obtain some change from the psychedelic experience. So, well, as a final conclusion, we can say that a first consumption of LSD may have benefits to mental health. But if the context is appropriate and if you have similar features of our sample, of course. Perhaps this information doesn't surprise to you, to the assistants of breaking convention, but should surprise to the scientific community, I think, because these benefits were obtained without any therapeutic guidelines. So we are talking about benefits of living the experience, of living the psychedelic experience, okay? And maybe the benefits of living an incredible and deeply positive experience, okay? So in a scientific thought, we must investigate the psychedelic-assisted therapy, no doubt about it, because or beyond this, we should consider the possibility for inducing deeply positive experiences just to improve mental health or life in general, okay? Why not, if we know these benefits and we know that the goal of the psychologist is to improve mental health, we should do that, in my opinion. If we can observe these benefits without any therapeutic orientation, I can't imagine that we can achieve in psychotherapy. It's the most promising thing that I had ever seen as a student of psychology, really. So, well, that's all. Thank you so much for your attention.